The United States calls him a global terrorist and offers a $5 million reward for his capture. Yet, 1 week after the Taliban took control, Khalil al-Rahman Haqqani moves freely around Kabul. The Taliban leader's schedule is full of meetings with Afghan leaders.
We're going to collect every group, political groups, all the groups, and unite them and work together to build a better Afghanistan and defend it.
Senior Taliban leaders have spent the week in negotiations. They say they want an inclusive government.
Khalil Haqqani is a leader in the Haqqani network and remains on terror watch lists and under UN sanctions. But now, here in Kabul, after 1 week, he is acting as a diplomat.
Part of the US-Taliban agreement signed last year was that the US would continue to provide funding to Afghanistan during and after its withdrawal. But since the Taliban's takeover, the US has frozen more than $9 billion in Afghan central bank reserves, and the International Monetary Fund says Afghanistan can no longer access its lending.
A firefight broke out between unidentified gunmen, Western security forces and Afghan guards at the northern gate of the Kabul airport on Monday, Germany's armed forces said, as thousands of Afghans and foreigners thronged the airport seeking to flee Taliban rule. One Afghan guard was killed and 3 others were injured in the battle, which also involved US and German forces, the German military said on Twitter, without specifying whether the dead Afghan was one of the Taliban fighters deployed to guard the airport. The airport has been a scene of chaos since Taliban seized Afghan capital on August 15th as US and international forces try to evacuate citizens and vulnerable Afghans.
It's the gas pipeline project continuing to stoke tensions in Europe. Stretching 1,230 kilometres through the Baltic Sea, Nord Stream 2 is set to double Russian gas exports to Germany, and it's almost complete. Like the Nord Stream 1, the new pipeline bypasses Ukrainian territory, cause for concern for Kiev. Nord Stream 2 is of diplomatic and economic concern to Kiev, as it stands to lose around 1.7 billion euros in transit revenues if Moscow abandons its onshore gas pipeline that passes through Ukraine. If this happens, Kiev could lose a potential source of leverage over Russia and fears a higher risk of full-scale military aggression. The two countries have been in conflict since Moscow's 2014 annexation of Crimea.
The reason given, security reasons, they put it. The move appeared to be an expression of anger from Cairo after Hamas held violent protests on the border with Israel, which an Israeli soldier was shot and critically wounded, along with dozens of Palestinians also injured as they came to confront the IDF. Now, the initial findings from the Israeli military's investigation into the violence along the border Saturday indicated that the troops were caught somewhat unprepared for the sudden rush of rioters toward the security fence. The rules of engagement were unclear, leading the troops to hold off taking any tougher measures to stop the attack you're seeing right here.
The US and South Korea want to bring North Korea back into talks to denuclearize. On Monday, Washington's special envoy for North Korea, Sung Kim, met with his counterpart in Seoul. His visit comes amid a simmering new standoff over Washington and Seoul's annual joint military exercises that Pyongyang warned could trigger a security crisis. The North sees these exercises as a rehearsal for war against it. But Kim tried to tamp down that tension. A brief thaw in relations between the two Koreas in June saw a hotline between the two reopen last month. That was a year after North Korea suspended them. But the moment didn't last. After preliminary training for the exercises began last week, the North stopped answering the phone.
Tonight, the desperate search for dozens of people still missing after catastrophic floods ravaged Middle Tennessee.
Look at that. This is from a creek that they tell me hardly flows normally.
At least 22 people killed, including 7-month-old twins, swept away from their father, about 60 unaccounted for. The record rainfall pummeling the area with more than 17 inches in just 24 hours, washing away homes and submerging cars. The floods inundating this family's home, furniture floating in the murky water. Sheds carried away in the floodwater, washed out roads littered with debris, furniture and appliances splayed across the roadways, cars flipped over, power lines toppled, homes ripped right off their foundations.
Waves crashed ashore in Kingstown, Rhode Island as tropical storm Henri made landfall on Sunday. Henri was downgraded from a hurricane earlier in the day and threatened the northeast coast with high winds, a dangerous storm surge, and drenching rainfall. Rain in low-lying parts of New Jersey left cars partially submerged. New York City's mayor urged residents to stay home. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said that even though the center of the storm might not hit the state, the area was not out of harm's way. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers closed the Fox Point Hurricane Barrier in Providence on Sunday to protect that city's downtown. The National Hurricane Center said Henri could produce storm surges of 3 to 5 feet in some areas, as well as 3 to 6 inches of rain.
Portland, Oregon descended into violence on Sunday as intense clashes broke out between far-right and left-wing groups. One man was arrested for firing a gun at demonstrators. A car was broken into and an ambulance truck was flipped. Luckily, no injuries have been reported. Portland has become a magnet for clashes between political extremists over the last year. Earlier this month, a black-clad Antifa group and a group wearing the colors of the far-right Proud Boys exchanged shots of pepper spray and paintballs, according to local media. Sunday's protests came on the anniversary of a clash last year following the murder of George Floyd, a black man killed by a Minneapolis police officer. That brawl resulted in the fatal shooting of a right-wing protester who was suspected to have been killed by a self-declared anti-fascist named Michael Rayonal. Rayonal was later shot and killed by police in Washington state as they tried to arrest him.
We start this bulletin with Nigeria, where bandits have now released 15 more students kidnapped last month from a Baptist school in the country's northwestern region. According to school authorities, the parents had raised and paid an undisclosed ransom to free the students. These 15 students were part of the original group of some 100 kids who were kidnapped on July 5th. From the Bethel Baptist High School in Kaduna in northwest Nigeria. Kidnappers released 28 children from the school in July, following the release of a first group 2 days after the raid. At present, over 60 students are still under captivity, and a negotiation process is currently underway to release them.